The galaxy had stopped watching Earth a long time ago. Not because humanity was destroyed, or conquered, or erased, but because it had become uninteresting. Among thousands of space-faring civilizations, Earth was catalogued as functional but dull, ambitious yet restrained, technologically competent but strategically unremarkable. The records described humans as adaptable traders, resilient colonists, and surprisingly cooperative diplomats. Nothing in those files suggested danger. Nothing suggested urgency. Nothing suggested fear. At the Galactic Council, Earth was rarely discussed unless logistics were involved. Human shipping lanes were efficient. Their agricultural exports were reliable. Their medical research was quietly impressive, though never shared without restrictions. They declined weapons exchanges. They refused joint fleet exercises. They cited doctrinal incompatibility and offered no elaboration. Over time, those refusals became background noise, then habits, then assumptions. The galaxy assumed humanity lacked ambition beyond survival. Council sessions concerning Earth were brief. Human delegates spoke only when addressed, and even then, they used few words. They never interrupted. They never raised their voices. They never threatened consequences. When disputes arose near human borders, Earth requested time, evacuation corridors, and neutrality guarantees. When denied, they complied anyway. Their colonies withdrew with discipline. Their fleets avoided confrontation. Observers called it caution. Rivals called it weakness. The galaxy valued displays of power. Dreadnought parades, weapons demonstrations, controlled annihilations of lifeless moons. Humanity did none of this. Their fleets were compact, standardized, and boring. No experimental silhouettes. No excessive energy signatures. No iconic flagships. Analysts concluded humans optimized for cost efficiency, not dominance. A species preparing to endure, not to rule. There were small anomalies, of course. Earth's refusal to allow deep-scan inspections of Sol. The unexplained mass shadows beyond their outer systems. The way human evacuation timelines always ended hours before threats materialized. The precision with which their supply chains rerouted during crises that had not yet been publicly announced. These details appeared in footnotes, not headlines. Patterns require attention, and the galaxy was busy elsewhere. As centuries passed, younger civilizations rose and fell. Borders shifted. Alliances fractured. Earth remained where it was, unchanged in posture, unchanged in tone. The humans did not expand aggressively, but they never lost territory either. Their casualty numbers and border incidents were statistically negligible. Their infrastructure recovery times defied standard models. Each anomaly was explainable in isolation. Together, they suggested preparation. No one assembled them. Eventually, discussions turned practical. Earth occupied valuable corridors. Human space interrupted expansion vectors. Some argued for integration. Others proposed oversight. A few suggested a limited enforcement action to test compliance. The prevailing belief was simple: if humanity possessed strength, it would have shown it by now. Power, after all, demanded recognition. Silence was interpreted as absence. When Earth was notified of policy reviews and potential realignments, its response was brief. Acknowledgement received. Civilian protections requested. No objections filed. No mobilization announced. Council observers noted the lack of urgency and moved on. The vote passed with minimal dissent. No one asked why Earth never protested. No one asked why a species that had survived planetary catastrophe, extinction threats, and internal wars would entrust its future to foreign judgment. No one asked why humanity invested so heavily in redundancy, resilience, and patience. The galaxy believed it understood humans because humans had allowed it to believe so. What the galaxy mistook for passivity was discipline. What it labeled irrelevance was focus. Humanity had learned long ago that survival did not belong to the loudest species, nor the most feared, but to the one that prepared in silence and acted only when acting was unavoidable. The incident began the way all controlled demonstrations did, with confidence and limited intent. A coalition task force entered the outermost human systems under the banner of enforcement, not war. Their orders were precise. Seize 2 peripheral colonies. Disable orbital infrastructure. Withdraw before escalation. The goal was not conquest but correction, a reminder that neutrality was not immunity. The galaxy watched with detached interest, expecting procedural resistance, followed by negotiation. What happened instead unsettled the observers. Human traffic vanished hours before the task force crossed the boundary. Civilian vessels rerouted without panic, without congestion, without broadcast pleas. Stations powered down in orderly phases. Supply depots emptied. Even data traffic thinned to background noise. The colonies were not abandoned in haste. They were cleared as if following a schedule written long in advance. The task force reported no resistance and no targets. The absence felt deliberate. As the fleets advanced, sensors degraded in narrow bands, not enough to trigger alarms, just enough to introduce doubt. Navigation solutions required constant correction. Communication latency spiked and then normalized. Nothing failed catastrophically. Nothing justified retreat. Yet captains began logging anomalies they could not explain without admitting unease. Patterns appeared and dissolved before they could be named. The coalition issued formal demands. Earth acknowledged receipt. Earth requested humanitarian corridors. Earth requested time. The reply was denied. The fleets pressed inward, confident that pressure would produce compliance. That confidence began to erode when human escorts appeared, not to engage, but to guide evacuations through paths the task force had not detected. They moved with quiet efficiency, ignoring hails, never presenting firing solutions, never accelerating beyond necessity. They were there, and then they were gone. Observers noticed something else. Human command made no appeals to the Council. No speeches. No pleas for arbitration. No threats of reprisal. The expected political noise never arrived. In its place was a steady stream of logistical notices: corridors open, civilians clear, infrastructure decommissioned. It was as if the humans had accepted loss without conceding anything at all. Then the coalition attempted a show of force. A single strike, precise and limited, aimed at an empty orbital ring to signal resolve. The weapons fired. The strike never landed. Telemetry returned intact, reporting full execution, yet the target remained unchanged. No explosion. No debris. The task force ran diagnostics and found nothing wrong. They attempted again. The result was identical. Perfect records, no effect. At that moment, the galaxy's attention sharpened. Human channels opened briefly. Not to negotiate terms, but to state a fact: further actions would increase risk to non-combatants. The message was calm, almost administrative. It contained coordinates for safe withdrawal and a timestamp after which guarantees would no longer apply. There was no ultimatum, only a boundary. The coalition debated. Retreat would imply weakness. Advance would force a reaction. Analysts argued that humans were bluffing, leveraging uncertainty because they lacked the means to enforce consequences. The vote favored continuation. Power respected decisiveness. As the fleets advanced past the timestamp, something subtle changed. Not an attack. Not a warning shot. Simply a shift in the background constants the crews had trusted. Energy budgets fluctuated within acceptable margins. Heat dissipation slowed. Autonomous systems requested human confirmation for tasks they had performed for centuries. Nothing failed outright, but everything required attention. It became clear then that humanity was not reacting. Humanity was managing. The task force commander requested guidance. The council delayed, demanding more data. There was none to give that could explain why a species that refused to fight had rendered a superior fleet cautious without firing a single shot. The galaxy had forced the moment it believed Earth unprepared for. It did not yet understand that humans had been waiting for precisely this kind of mistake. The revelation did not begin with a weapon discharge or a declaration of intent. It began with absence. Coalition sensors tracking the edge of human space lost a mass shadow they had not known was there. One moment, the background curvature registered as static interference. The next, it resolved into structure. Not emerging, not arriving, but acknowledging presence, as if something immense had decided it was no longer necessary to remain ignored. The object did not accelerate. It did not translate through known jump signatures. Space around it stabilized, gravitational gradients smoothing as though rewritten. Analysts struggled to classify what they were seeing because every known category failed. It was mobile yet anchored. Artificial, yet grown in layers of impossible density. Larger than any carrier ever constructed, yet shaped with restraint rather than intimidation. No glowing spines. No exposed weapon arrays. Just scale, purpose, and silence. Human channels opened for exactly one transmission. No flourish. No warning. A simple notification that a strategic asset had been activated. The term used was not a name but a designation, dry and procedural, implying there were others like it. That implication unsettled the Council more than the object itself. The Supercarrier moved into full sensor visibility, not to threaten the Coalition fleets, but to interpose itself between them and the evacuated systems. It did not target anything. It did not lock weapons. Yet targeting solutions across the task force collapsed anyway, overwhelmed by computational mass and signal dominance. Fire control systems reported clean lines of sight that could not be reconciled with reality. The object was there, but it was also everywhere their math said it should not be. Internal readings from the carrier began to leak through passive observation. Rotational habitats. Redundant command strata. Industrial-scale fabrication arrays already online. Energy reserves that made capital ships appear anemic. This was not a platform built for a single battle. It was infrastructure. A war ecosystem, self-sustaining and patient, designed to remain operational long after others would be reduced to scrap or memory. Still, it did nothing. The Coalition fleets drifted, weapons hot, crews waiting for the strike that never came. Commanders demanded permission to fire. Permission was delayed, then denied, then delayed again as the Council tried to understand what escalation meant in the presence of something that had already achieved dominance by existing. The Supercarrier did not jam communications. It did not blind sensors completely. It allowed observation, as if understanding required consent. Human traffic resumed cautiously around the carrier's periphery. Small craft, unarmed, moving with confidence that bordered on indifference. They treated the construct not as a last resort but as familiar ground. Maintenance operations began even as enemy fleets watched, unable to interfere. The message was unspoken but unmistakable: this had always been here. Galactic historians would later argue about the moment fear truly took hold. Some pointed to the carrier's size. Others to the elegance of its systems. Most agreed it was when the Coalition realized Earth had not built this in response to the incident. The timelines did not match. The material science did not align. The design philosophy belonged to a civilization that had planned for threats far beyond those currently present. Silence descended not because humanity had revealed a weapon, but because the galaxy understood it had been observed, measured, and accounted for long before it chose to test human limits. The Supercarrier remained motionless, a reminder that escalation was no longer a question of strength, but of permission. Humanity spoke after the galaxy had exhausted its questions and found no answers of its own. The transmission did not originate from the Supercarrier, nor from any planetary capital. It came from a distributed relay, calm and unadorned, carrying no insignia beyond a simple identifier: Earth Unified Command. The voice was human, unaltered, neither raised nor softened for effect. It spoke as one would to colleagues who had misread a situation and needed correction. The message began with clarification. The Supercarrier was not a response to the current incident. It was not deployed in anger. It had not been armed for this encounter, because arming it would have been unnecessary. Humanity explained that the construct existed to ensure that no single miscalculation, no coalition surge, no ideological crusade could ever again threaten planetary extinction. It was described not as a weapon, but as a stabilizer. As the words carried across the fleet's systems responded. Not violently, not suddenly. Coalition reactors downshifted into standby without command input. Missile bays reported safeties engaged at a hardware level beyond software override. Energy weapons lost phase coherence the moment capacitors reached firing thresholds. Every system remained intact, undamaged, and unusable. Engineers worked frantically, finding no sabotage, no breach, no external intrusion they could counter. The Supercarrier had not attacked them. It had simply rewritten the conditions under which aggression functioned. The human voice continued, almost instructional. Earth had mapped the decision trees of interstellar conflicts centuries earlier. It had modeled not just battles, but fear, pride, delay, and misunderstanding. The carrier's systems were designed to interrupt those paths at the point where escalation became irreversible. Humanity did not claim moral superiority. It stated necessity. Their species had survived by learning that winning wars was less important than preventing the ones that could not be won. A pause followed, long enough for the silence to feel intentional. Then terms were offered. Safe withdrawal routes were transmitted in real time, updated dynamically to avoid accidental encounters. Medical support was extended to any vessel reporting casualties. No demands for surrender were issued. No reparations requested. The only condition was distance. Human space would remain unviolated, not because it was forbidden, but because violations served no purpose. Council delegates protested, demanded assurances, threatened sanctions that no longer carried weight. The human response did not change. The carrier would remain until all foreign fleets had exited the designated perimeter. After that, it would return to inactive status. Humanity did not intend to occupy, police, or influence galactic affairs. It would simply ensure that its own survival was never again subject to external approval. One by one, coalition commanders ordered retreats. Not in panic, but with the careful obedience of professionals who recognized an unwinnable equation. As ships crossed the withdrawal lines, their systems restored full functionality, as if released from an invisible constraint. No pursuit followed. No final warning. The Supercarrier remained still, patient to the end. When the last vessel departed, the human voice spoke once more. Earth had no desire to be feared. It asked only to be left alone to prepare for futures others had not yet imagined. The transmission ended. The carrier powered down, its presence fading back into the fabric of space, leaving behind an understanding the galaxy could not unlearn. The galaxy did not celebrate the end of the incident. There were no victory declarations, no triumphant broadcasts, no symbolic condemnations. What followed was quieter and far more disruptive. Strategic doctrines were rewritten in emergency sessions that stretched for cycles. Long-held assumptions about deterrence, escalation, and balance of power were discarded without ceremony. Humanity had not shattered fleets or erased worlds. It had invalidated the logic on which interstellar dominance was built. Council records began to change their language. Earth was no longer classified as passive or neutral. New terms appeared, carefully chosen and rarely spoken aloud. Strategic unknown. Non-coercible actor. Absolute deterrent. None of them fully captured what had occurred, but all of them reflected the same realization: human restraint was not the absence of strength, but the result of excess control. Trade routes near human space were rerouted without protest. Patrols adjusted their distances instinctively, even when no formal exclusion zones were declared. Exploratory fleets revised mission parameters when simulations included proximity to Sol. No one issued an order demanding this caution. It emerged organically, the way behavior changes after a near miss that reveals how little margin for error had existed. The Supercarrier was never seen again. No sensors detected its withdrawal. No signatures marked its dormancy. It simply ceased to be relevant to immediate observation, as if space itself had folded it back into a place where urgency could not reach. That absence became its own presence. The knowledge that it could return was enough. Humanity resumed its former posture. Shipping lanes reopened. Research exchanges continued under the same quiet restrictions. Diplomatic envoys spoke politely and briefly. No demands were made for apology or compensation. Earth did not leverage fear for influence. It did not seek leadership or reform. It behaved exactly as it had before, except now the galaxy listened to what had once been ignored. In academic circles, the incident was dissected endlessly. Some argued that humans had crossed a dangerous threshold by unilaterally enforcing peace. Others countered that peace enforced without conquest was preferable to wars justified by balance. A minority proposed that humanity had acted not as a power, but as a failsafe, intervening only when extinction probabilities exceeded acceptable limits. That theory gained traction when analysts realized how narrowly the coalition's actions had avoided triggering cascading conflict models humanity had already prepared to contain. Among civilians, the story took a simpler shape. Humans were no longer mocked for their silence. They were no longer dismissed as cautious traitors hiding behind diplomacy. They were spoken of with a mix of unease and respect reserved for forces that did not need explanation. Children of distant worlds learned a new lesson in their history primers. Some civilizations survive not by conquering space, but by understanding it well enough to know when not to fight. Earth continued to prepare. Not in secret now, but without display. The galaxy understood that whatever humans were building next would not be revealed until revealing it was unavoidable. That understanding altered behavior more effectively than any threat ever had. In the end, what lingered was not fear of human weapons, but awareness of human perspective. A species that had nearly destroyed itself learned to value continuity over victory, prevention over dominance. The galaxy had looked for monsters, tyrants, or saviors. What it found was something far more unsettling and far more stable, a civilization that had decided survival itself was worth defending, quietly, permanently, and without asking permission.